And now I'd like to introduce our speaker, Dr. Mary Flett.
Thank you, Laura. It's just so exciting to be talking to you today about a topic that is near and dear to my heart. I've been a clinical psychologist for 30 years. I actually started my career down in Redwood City. And one of the most extraordinary experiences I have had in this business is the privilege of sitting across from somebody who is struggling with a decision as to whether they want to live or they want to leave this life. This is not an easy topic to talk about. It is one that historically we speak about in terms of statistics and information and what to do and what not to do, with a sort of expectation that that will take away the fear, the doubt, the intensity of the experience of sitting across from somebody. Friendly voices, and those of you that are in the profession of working with aging adults who may be trying to decide whether they want to stay or go, know that this is not an easy thing to do, and it has consequences. So my goal today is not so much to give you information about the person you're sitting across from, but to give you some tools and techniques and the space to explore what this effect of being a volunteer, being present with and experiencing what is, I'm going to use a term here, a holy moment with another human being. My gratitude to Friendly Voices for the opportunity to chat with you today, and also to San Mateo County Health. What I ask of you is that you open your heart, you open your mind. Please do keep in mind that some of the topics that we're going to be talking about today may trigger a response in you. Whatever that response is just that. It is a response. There is something there that is communicating with you. Be gentle with yourself, be gentle with others. If something comes up for you that needs extra support and work, then please reach out to the support networks that you do have, whether they be coworkers or friends or spiritual counselors, or even something more, I don't know, in my field of work. So I'm going to put my screen on now because, of course, I have a PowerPoint, which we must do. That seems to be the law if you're going to do a presentation. And let me get this set up to go. Here we are.
Mary, before you start, you let me
Yes.
know if you need me to change any of the view. I don't know what you're all seeing, but you just let me know what you need me to do for you.
If you would let Laura know that you can see this screen in your screen, I'm going to assume that everybody does. Can I see a thumbs up from folks if you can see it? I love it. We're already interacting. Okay. So what we're going to do today is how to manage the situation. We're going to talk about the essential skills, risk assessments, what to do, what not to do, and even more importantly, we're going to talk about managing the fallout, which is self-care. How do we take care of ourselves in a situation like this? And then how do we deal with the open endings? One of the things about people who make the decision and then are successful in dying by suicide is that oftentimes there are unanswered questions. And what we do as human beings is we fill in the blanks. So I'm going to talk about what it's like to have to deal with open endings. Today, we are at a final crossroad, and we're all going to die. Some of us choose our death. And I have to tell you, it's so important that we understand the difference between not wanting to live and wanting to die. That is at the core of what it means to be a compassionate and an honest witness. Now, honesty here is less to do with about lying, telling the truth, than it does with just being aware and letting our feelings be present and being honest about what those feelings are. I want you to understand that our culture has an unquestioned, unchallenged belief that life is better than death at all costs. We have based this on social, cultural, spiritual, and even legal requirements that reinforce this belief. When we are working with people who are making a choice as to whether or not they want to live or die, we're up against this unquestioned belief that, of course, you want to stay alive. And I'm going to assume that everybody who is on this webinar has experienced the fact that many people don't really have a lot of reasons for sticking around. And in point of fact, when you think about it, it might be better for them to be able to let go of this thing that we call life. So the moral, it's a sanctity of life. Every major religion and faith has some prohibition against taking our own lives. I find that fascinating, that there is something at our very, very core for thousands of years that has sent the message that we should stick around. We also have a very important need to protect vulnerable elders and children. For example, someone who has stages of dementia, for example, where they don't appear to be able to make informed decisions about their care. Maybe they're impulsive. Maybe they're experiencing some form of a infection or something that makes them unable to make a decision for themselves, and they act out of that. We really do have an obligation to at least put a barrier between the act of attempting to kill themselves and the actual execution. There's also, and this is where the statistics comes in, a public health issue. What is interesting to me is that even though adults over the ages of 65 only make up about 12% of the population, successful suicides make up 18% of that. Now, if you look at it, that means that there's a good 80% of people who over 65 either are not contemplating ending their lives or are somehow learning to live with whatever compromises or challenges they may face. But it still goes to this fact that maybe there are things we can do, should do. Maybe all that is needed is someone being on the other end of the phone or reaching across the table, holding somebody's hand in a nursing facility, or even just reaching out using Zoom or a card that would keep someone here and have their lives improved long enough for them to decide they do want to stay here. So this brings up the question of what you do. And I firmly believe, and this is what we're going to spend the rest of today talking about, is that your role is to allow the individual you are present with to express his or her or their, because we now are really moving into the era of transgendered elders, their reasons for wanting to live and wanting to die. Managing the situation. This is a situation, right? Well, is it? And what does managing mean? I'm going to spend time talking about these two words because there's an implied outcome here that if we just manage things a certain way, if the situation is changed in a certain way, the outcome will be that the person will continue to live. And I want us to think about that. I don't, after 30 years in this business, think that I can manage much of anything, much less my own life. I try my very, very best to tell people and give them good advice on what to do. And I've had to come to terms with the fact that even though I give exquisite advice and I'm very wise, the majority of the folks I give my wisdom to and my advice to don't follow it. So I'm no longer as attached as I used to be to having management be my goal. The situation can, and we learned this from the pandemic, change literally from just making a friendly phone call once a week to the phone call being the absolute lifeline for someone who is now isolated and without contact of any kind, not because of anything they did or said or any economic condition they're in, but because of a pandemic. We certainly weren't prepared for that. And we've learned so much from that. So how do you manage yourself? What is it that we're really talking about here? Essential skills, we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about risk assessment. We're going to talk about what to do and what not to do. And that's what you came for here. You get all your money out of that. But what I really want you to start thinking about is, what is it that scares you the most about the work that you are doing? Okay. I'm going to ask this question. We're going to try an interactive moment here. So for those of you who are extroverts, I'm going to ask that you jump right in, and you can unmute yourselves at this point, because I really do want to hear your thoughts about the following questions. In the work that you are doing, what are you afraid of doing wrong? Does anybody want to be brave and just share something? Remember to unmute yourself. I don't have everybody up showing, so speak up if you, oh, please, Laura.
Yeah, I'm recording and I can't see everyone. I hope you can all see each other. I'm afraid of feeling responsible for somebody else's life.
Okay.
When I'm working with older adults, I'm afraid of that feeling of responsibility.
I see heads nodding, so I'm going to assume that that's shared by many of you. Yeah. Anybody else have a fear or concern? What are you afraid of doing wrong?
Saying the wrong thing that might further upset the person.
Jean, I see you raised your hand.
So I would say I'm afraid that I miscommunicate, and so my non-malicious intentions are interpreted as something else. My empathetic intentions are interpreted as something else. Yeah.
And there would be a consequence of that?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So good intentions and responsibility, that's two. I saw another hand. Maria, take yourself off of mute. There we go.
Kind of along those lines is inadvertently saying something in a way that makes the person feel worse. Yeah.
That has that, well, I'll do a follow-up question, but that brings up a lot of possibilities, particularly when we start to look at the nuancing of having to ask questions of people who may be from a different culture or a different generation, or have different experiences that maybe we were assuming are similar, but they really aren't. So yeah, anybody else? These are great answers. Michelle?
I'm thinking, because this is done over the phone, I'm not able to see the nonverbal cues that might help me to not miss something or misconstrue something, and not know if there's something to really be concerned about, or they're just saying something.
And the consequence of that, of course, is that something might be left unsaid, or somebody might harm themselves because you haven't said the right thing. You haven't been able to see it. These are
Right.
fabulous, fabulous answers. Elise, did I say that name correctly?
You said it perfectly. Thank you.
Thank you.
I know from my experience that my seniors have often been very isolated, and their topics of conversation start getting very small. And I'm afraid of how much does one share before these feelings of, if you know somebody is inherently tending to be on the sadder, more depressed side, that you don't want to make them more sad, feel more isolated. And yet, if they ask the question, you feel as if you need to answer it honestly and openly, but I never, it's that,
I'm appreciating the dilemma because, you know, this is, we want to reach out with our heart, but
Yeah.
sometimes, you know, what you're talking really about here, Elise, is values. And sometimes the values that we hold really dearly and importantly, I want to share this with you because I care about you. The impact of that value on somebody else might be to shut them down, or it might have an adverse consequence that you weren't planning on. Yeah. So I'm going to pull this into the next piece because you've talked about essentially all the things that I have ever heard people say that they're afraid of doing wrong. Why do you think that makes you afraid? What is it about causing another person greater distress that causes you distress?
I can say something about that. This is
Please.
Linda. Yeah. And then I'm afraid doing it wrong, hurting feelings. And also I gotta be myself too. And I feel like sometimes I'm not going about it the right way. Why? Because I'm not a religious person in any way. But it seems like the people that I have for my buddies are deeply religious, and I think they would like me to join them on that crusade, and I can't, and I won't. So I'm always afraid that this might be my last phone call with them, that they're going to report me as a bad,
Okay.
that I'm
Yeah.
doing a bad job.
So that was very eloquent, Linda, and I can't speak for the folks at Friendly Voices, but I can speak for you because I've shared that dilemma. And what I do to make peace with that is just to realize that I can take my own doubt and do with it what I can. My role in being with another person, though, is to let them express themselves and to let them be heard. We're going to talk a little bit about that. And I suspect, although I do not know you for very long, Linda, that you are very good at letting people know they've been heard. I saw another hand up and oops, come back here. I was pushing the wrong button. Whose hand was it? It was
me, Jean.
Jean. Okay, thank
Put
you.
my hand down because I momentarily forgot the question. I think the possibility of doing harm makes me afraid because it's one of my values to not harm other people and that to treat other people how I want to be treated.
Yeah.
And so there's the possibility of someone perceiving me as not hearing them and not acting in their best interest.
Okay. What I appreciate about all of these responses is that they come from a place of compassion and concern for our impact on another human being. These next two questions, I'm not even going to spend time asking you about, but I'll give you a chance to think about whether or not it's changed your life any. Have you ever done that? I'm going to say the universal answer is yes. I have said things that have hurt other people. It's true. Has anybody killed themselves because of something I said? I can say unequivocally no. And this is what it brings up. Somehow we are so concerned about our impact on another human being that we forget, not wrong or right, but we just forget that we're there to bear witness. We're not there to fix. We're not there to save. We're there to listen and bear witness to someone else's suffering. Honestly, there's no higher purpose. I don't care if you're an atheist or not. I don't care if you're a fundamentalist Christian. I don't care if you are a Zen Buddhist or a Theravada Buddhist. There is no greater calling. And probably that's why you're doing the kind of work that you're doing, is because you've listened to that and somehow you put yourself in the position of risking being human, because that's what this is about. So how do we manage the situation? Okay, this is a wonderful quote from Anne Lamott. I don't know, she's a local Bay Area icon if you don't know her. She lives up in Marin here. Everyone is flailing through this life without an owner's manual, with whatever modicum of grace and good humor we can manage. And I want to point out to you that this is the human condition for all of us. And only a very small percentage ever actually takes the steps to end their life. So what do you bring to the table here? Because this is what we're doing. We're bearing witness to someone else's distress and suffering. You bring compassion that's obvious based on what you've already shared. You bring an ability to listen. That is the greatest tool that you have in your toolbox, the ability to listen. You also have training, the training you get in whatever respective organizations you are in, and the training is essential. I'm hoping as part of that training, you also have opportunities to do sharing and support of one another. And this again is important, you bring your life experience. You bring life to sit across or be on the other end of the phone from someone who is contemplating not living. Remember what I said, there is a default to living. That is a potent in motivator for people when they are feeling particularly bad. So let's talk about risk assessment, particularly the skill of listening. What is it that you are listening for? And as I believe, Angela, you mentioned, when you're on the other end of the phone, well, most of your senses are closed down, aren't they? I mean, especially if you like to see somebody and you can read body language and things like that. But what you're listening for when you're just listening is tone, pace, sometimes the slurring of words or words in a odd way of being formed, and edginess. So you call up somebody, maybe this is your first visit with them, and hi, this is Mary from Friendly Voices. I'm here to chat with you today. Forgive me, I don't know all your protocol, but how are you doing today, Mr. Jones? And Mr. Jones says, fine. And you go, oh, Mr. Jones, well, there are a few things that I have to get through here, but Mr. Jones, it sounds like something's going on for you. Would you mind sharing a little bit with me? Well, I'm just tired. Nothing. Everything's fine. Everything's just fine. Okay. Well, now we have something to work with. Okay. You've been with them for several visits. They've gotten to know you. You're engaged with them, and they've been telling you about their life, and it's fascinating. And then you call up and they go, I don't think I'm doing so good today. Oh my God, what's wrong? Mr. Jones, what's happened? What happened? Well, I think I might, I don't know that I don't know. Okay. So now antenna are up. What's going on with Mr. Jones? Based on what you found out about him, you may need to make a decision about whether or not you need to initiate some care for Mr. Jones. I'm not going to go into the protocol and what all has to happen about that, but you've heard the difference. You've been given information that you now have to act on. So there's where you rely on your training within your agency or within your program. That's when you stop being responsible for what happens to Mr. Jones and you advocate and act on his behalf. So the next thing is, what are you listening with? Okay, well, there is the obvious. We listen with our ears, but again, as Angela mentioned, we listen with our eyes. We listen with our whole body. How many of you have been on a call and you just know something's wrong? You can put your hands up or wave a thumb or, put something in the chat with this. What do you know? How do you do that? What part of you? Is it your heart that's beating faster? Is it your stomach that's kind of going? Do you have the hair on the back of your neck go up, or your arms? Do you tense up? All of these are ways of giving you information, listening with your whole body. And it's really, really, really important before you enter into the call or before you sit across from somebody that you give your body a chance to just relax. And it might just be as simple as rolling your shoulders back and taking 1 or 2 breaths before making the call, so that you can use this whole instrument that you have to listen with. What are you hearing? Okay. Sometimes we listen so closely for certain words that we miss out on the context, or we miss out on the totality of a call. Sometimes we're triggered by a level of anxiety in somebody's voice, or urgency, or sadness, that we miss out on what it is they're trying to communicate with us. So what you are hearing is really important to pay attention to. And then, of course, and you know this already, what isn't being said? And this again brings it into the arena of what you are bringing to this, the compassion and the honesty. If someone is afraid to talk to you about what is giving them trouble in the moment, then we're not really going to be able to be present and witness and maybe give them the space necessary for them to talk about something. Okay, so it is risky to ask about what's not being said. And I will absolutely tell you that this is not something that you pick up and just do after a seminar for 15 or 20 minutes. This is probably the ongoing skill that I work on the most. And again, I've been doing this for a lot of years, but I have learned to quiet myself and just remind myself that all I am here to do is explore and to try and bring something to the surface. I don't need to fix. So really what we're asking when you start asking these questions is you're asking permission to intrude into something that may be shame-based or fear-based or trauma-based. So you want to go in and you want to ask those questions gently, respectfully, kindly, but also persistently, because that's the work we're doing here. Then we come down to what's stopping you from asking. And this isn't to point fingers or to say you're a bad person or anything like that. We all have these areas of our lives, instructions that we were given. It's not polite to ask people these questions, or you shouldn't be nosing around in other people's business or any of that. But it also might be that something is triggered by the person we're sitting across from or listening to on the other end of the phone that we haven't come to terms with yet ourselves. And this is where it's important in the moment to acknowledge this for yourself, accept it, create sufficient space around it for it to just be there with not needing to be fixed. It's called acceptance, and we'll talk about that more in a second. And then reach out to your colleagues and to those who support you, and give yourself the kindness and the tenderness, the compassion and the honesty that you were just sharing with the person you are calling. I love this comment from Thich Nhat Hanh. The secret of creating peace is that when you listen to another person, you have only one purpose: to offer him or her the opportunity to empty their heart. This work that you're doing is creating a safe space for both of you. You are developing trust and acceptance. And out of that comes the compassion and the honesty that makes a difference in someone's life. So essential skills boils down to these three things: be present, listen, and be heard. Watch your own inner dialogue. Oh my God, what am I saying? What am I doing? Because if you're more involved with your concerns or fears about what it is you're saying, it's probably going to be difficult to really be present with the person that you are sitting across from. Acceptance. So, we have to have a mnemonic. I think I should charge extra because these are mnemonics that just, I can't own this. I wish I did, but the 4 A's of acceptance are acknowledge, allow, accommodate, and appreciate. What this means is we acknowledge what it is that's coming up for us. So I am nervous and scared. I was nervous and scared before this session today. And here I am sitting across from you and it feels relaxed. Okay, I'm noticing that I've gotten into my shtick. I'm in my own mode and things are moving along here. This is called naming it and claiming it. Okay? You don't have to do this out loud. You can do it in your own head. Maybe you notice before you make a phone call, oh, I don't really feel like talking to Mr. J today because, he was in a bad space last week. I don't know. Okay. Just acknowledge that. Nothing else you have to do with it. One of the things about feelings and thoughts is that they're like being on an endless carousel, right? They just keep going around and around and around. It's not like you haven't had that feeling before or that thought before. It came from somewhere and it went somewhere and it's back again. Yeah. And if you are into 60s, 70s music, this is just feelings, nothing more than feelings. And not to minimize that, because feelings can be intense and overwhelming and uncomfortable, but they're still just feelings. Accommodate, give me space. If you're on that carousel going around and around and around, it's hard literally to get off, right? But if you can be on the outside and just watch those animals, those carousel figures go around and around, it gives you space to maybe identify things in a different way. If you can step back even a little bit further, maybe you can see that within the greater context of things, within a greater lifespan, within a greater moment, that this too shall pass. And then appreciate whatever it is that's coming up for you. All of us have uncomfortable feelings that started out as allies. That fear, that's the stomach turning over, was a tap on your shoulder to pay attention at one point in time. What we tend to do, particularly in this culture, is we push our feelings down and we don't want to be overly emotional because that's just too much. But appreciating that at one point in your lifetime, this was just a tap on your shoulder to ask you to pay attention to something can give you a way to move through the uncomfortable and intense experience that oftentimes feels more like an emotional hangover. Want to get to the end here and have some room for conversation. What is absolutely essential here is we learn how to take care of ourselves. It's hard to see good when all you ever see is bad. Okay? And physical, emotional, spiritual, cognitive, and social self-care makes you better able to be a compassionate and honest and present individual in the work that you're doing. So let's talk just briefly about some of the things that might come up for you physically. A lot of times people's sleep in doing this kind of work is disturbed. Or you may find yourself comfort food eating after a particularly intense call. Maybe the chocolate goes in or something along those lines. Emotional issues. I have oftentimes in the stress and tension of the moment of being with somebody, been fully present, and then gone out to my car and just wept because the sadness is just so overwhelming. The sadness is overwhelming, not just for the individual, but for seeing myself as being vulnerable. This may actually also happen, could possibly happen to me. Sometimes we also replay a session over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. That's not a bad thing to do as long as it doesn't become chasing something in the gerbil wheel. Spiritual issues. Again, I'm speaking broadly here, not faith-based issues, but just questioning the meaning and purpose of life. So often that is one of the main things that individuals, particularly as we are living so much longer these days, we've run out of purpose. Spouse dies, or there's just no more meaning in my life, or some illness is just dragging on and on and on and on and on. And we feel useless and used up and just a bother to somebody else. Those are incredibly emotionally pulling issues to deal with. It also brings up, what's the meaning behind this? Is there any meaning? Why do I have to suffer? And I leave that to you individually, because there is no one answer for that. But if you have a spiritual practice, oftentimes there are counselors, spiritual guides, people who can explore these things with you. But please do not feel the need to, I don't even want to go there, so I'm not going to come up with that. Sorry. I said cognitive issues. I'm going through this because I'm basically thinking through the body's symptoms. A lot of times I will, in the moment, in the intense moment, sitting across from somebody, particularly somebody who's got chronic depression can almost feel as if it is catching. So you leave the call and you just feel exhausted. Everything started out beautiful. You were in Oz, and now we're back in Kansas. Everything goes gray. That can have an impact on your physiologic symptom. Your immune system can actually become suppressed. So taking a moment, as I said before, after a call or before a call, to get back into your body is really important for your physical health. If it has been a particularly scary situation and someone is saying, I am going to kill myself, I need to do something right now, I can't live any longer, that brings a response up in our bodies from our autonomic nervous system. That's the fight or flight experience. And we need to manage that and come back into our bodies. The fight or flight gives us actually a way to leave our bodies psychologically. In the moment, you might have had this experience of a suspension of time when it's really intense or something, and you realize, oh my God, it's only been 5 minutes. All that time has gone by. Our brains compensate for that. Our bodies compensate for that. And it's important after the event to come back into our body. The best way, the kindest way, the most compassionate way to do that is through doing a body tensing, relaxing, and then just breathing. Breath will get you back into your body every single time. So we're coming to the end here, and I want to spend some time with questions and having people talk about what you've heard today. But we're just a guest for a very short time in another person's lifetime. We probably do not have the power or influence to change them. What we can do, though, while we're in their lives, is be compassionate. If a person chooses to end their life, or less dramatically, if a person chooses to no longer be using the services of you as a phone buddy, there will be an unfinished ending, an open ending. And it is just human to try and fill in the blanks. I'm at a point in my life now where I don't really like a lot of unknowns. I would like more predictability in my life. So when I do my reading these days, I'll read the end of the book so I know what's going to happen, because I just can't put up with too much unknown. But if that ending hasn't been written, then we will fill in the blanks. And sometimes this is comforting, and sometimes it can be like a stone in your shoe. I just invite you to remember that it's not your responsibility to write the ending for someone else's life. Because we may never know why.